So this is Baruch here, and trying to get my head around where we're going today. This is the ultimate connection with God. What we're trying to do is correct. What Rabbi Mimran is trying to show us is the path for which we can actually combine ourselves with eternity. Now, that requires some effort in terms of mind control. Because what he said in the early part of this series is that our thoughts become us. Therefore, let's say, like to take myself, like yesterday, I had a really an incident with my car, and I was concerned about it. It worried me because it could be that the car it went through some bad water, and people were saying that your car is finished, it's total. I had to have it analyzed, and I was nervous about it. Whenever you get nervous and your mind starts going back and forth over the issue, Rabbi Memran is saying that that's the way the mind works. If you rely on your mind and that's all you are, that's all you do is you think back and forth about things that bother you or worry you. But it is possible to gain control of your mind. And so therefore you could see the situation that you're really in and you could drive into it. I had to drive my car someplace. It turned out Baruch Hashem. But even so, things work out good, they work out bad. We're always in the middle of that watching it. If we can learn how to do that to gain control of the emotions that are stirred by the thoughts going back and forth. Let's see what Rabbi Mimran says over here. We're going to be in the section which is called hearing voices. Now, before we get to that, like I like to do, is I'd like to look at this little blurb that he said the last time. There says there is a vast amount of intelligence that can take you to realms above and beyond the limitations of thought alone. So it is possible, he wants to say, to get beyond the level of where your mind is parrying back and forth different ideas. Uh, there's so many different things psychologically that you could say that are in your mind. And I think that one of the things that Rabbi Memran is saying is that the mind normally is defensive. And so it's thinking about the survival of your body. What does it take? So therefore you could be insulted or you could be hurt. All different kinds of things can happen that really affect what's going on in the necessity to try to protect your body, which is going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in your mind. The Rebbe Memrons wants to say that beyond that lifestyle is another one. And he used to call this, and I think he'll probably get to that, I'm not sure, of left brain versus right brain. So as far as the left side of the brain is concerned, it's always combative or thinking about the offense, but that's part of defense. So that defense business is going on the left side of your brain, but it's possible to tune in to the creative side of your brain. And that side of your brain, he calls it the right side of your brain. That's the side which has a flow, which is coming from a higher place. It is not debating this one or that one and going back and forth. That is possible to achieve, and that's what we're working on. So he writes like this in part 6. He says, hearing voices. So let's read the blurb in English. So it's hard for me. This is just the beginning of the book, so I'll hold it with one hand. It says, in the beginning, one should increase his devekas with Hashem, the Blessed One. By doing this, a person will be accomplishing what the Pasuk made reference to as having a share with him. Similarly, we find it in Shir Hashirim, giving a kiss with his mouth. Now, what he's saying, this is the Ramchal, and he says what he's saying is that it's possible to come to great intimacy with eternity. If you would walk into the doctor's office and say, I hear a voice in my head, in all likelihood, you would be referred to a psychiatrist for treatment. Hearing voices is not considered acceptable in our society. Nevertheless, it is extremely common. The truth is, absolutely everyone hears a voice, or perhaps several voices, in his or her head, voices that are running constantly, they never stop. Those voices are the thought processes that flow involuntarily through our minds. The ongoing monologues and dialogues and we don't even realize that we are capable of stopping them. And that's the point, is that he was saying in previous lessons, that the mind starts controlling us and we think that we are our mind. So now he's pointing out that's not true. He says, surely at some point you've come across people walking down the street, talking or muttering to themselves incessantly. Quite possibly you've simply written them off as mentally ill without giving them a second thought. But have you ever paid close attention to the workings of your own mind? Has it ever occurred to you that we and all the other, quote, normal people in the world are not so very different from those, quote, mentally ill individuals you've seen? Is the difference between talking inside of your head and then talking outside of your head when you start uttering the words. So the voices in our heads are continually commenting, speculating, judging, comparing, complaining, liking, and disliking. What is unique about those we consider to be mentally ill is that they do not do all this aloud. Is that they do all of this aloud, while we generally keep our mental conversations to ourselves. All this chatter going on in our heads may have nothing to do with what is going on with us at the time. In other words, I'm thinking that when the normal process is going on, you really lose track of what's around you, that you're not really receiving input from everything that's around you because you're so deeply involved in your own thinking. No matter what is happening right now, our minds may be busily involved in reliving the past, whether recent or distant, or it may be imagining or even rehearsing any number of possible future situations that may or not actually occur. Often enough, it imagines things going wrong. You start going like this, the defensive person, or negative outcomes, even if things that go right, which is what we call worry. And the mind may strengthen and intensify these thoughts by turning up the volume, adding visual images, or even adding mental movies to the mix. Play it out, Sam. But don't we need this voice in our head? So questions like this, but wait a minute. Don't you have to do this? It may be very relevant to the situation at hand, he says. It may prove to be quite helpful. Perhaps we are sure that we won't be able to manage without it. We actually need to think this through. Even if the voice we hear is relevant, in all likelihood, says Rabbi Mimran, we will interpret the situation in its own biased way by relating it to the past. We all tend to view the present through the eyes of the past, and that is how we judge almost everything in our lives. The reason for this is that our minds have been conditioned by our history, by all that we have experienced in the past. And not only what we have experienced, but what we've inherited from our parents and ancestors and what we've absorbed from the world around us. It's like a train that's been playing in our heads for generations. The culture in which we find ourselves and all the people with whom we come in contact, it is to do this thoroughly conditioned mind that the voices in our head belong. So going through from the time of your experiences, your parents' experiences, your ancestors' experiences, and your point of view, everything gets funneled into that. And he said it is to this thoroughly conditioned mind that the voices in our heads belong. So he writes and he finishes, the voice in your head might be your own worst enemy. So many people live with a most unwelcome permanent resident in their minds. They can't stop worrying. That resident is a professional tormentor, a voice that is continuously attacking and punishing them, causing them endless misery and unhappiness. It drains them of vital energy and may well result in broken relationships, stress-related disorders, nervous breakdowns, heart attacks, strokes, and diseases, the end result of this worry. So he writes in his blurb, and we'll use this for the next time, and we'll see what we can do. It says, so many people live with the most unwelcome permanent resident in their minds, a professional tormentor, a voice that is continuously attacking and punishing them. Now that's where you see a lot of times in Kabbalah is the concept of the accuser, that our averas penetrate us, and they start accusing us, causing them endless misery and unhappiness. Can this be controlled? Can we come back through to the light of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu and attach ourselves to that? That is Rabbi Mimran's goal here. This is Baruch Fleischman teaching or learning the ultimate connection with God by Rabbi Yosef Chaim Mimran.